Good morning and welcome back. Welcome to the Radical Vision for Disability show, where we begin to understand how important it is to recognize those with disabilities, but also recognize the persons that are caregivers for those with disabilities. And sometimes there's a point where the caregivers really need to understand, or they want to understand what that person with the disabilities is asking, because sometimes they're nonverbal and sometimes they're unable to ask for what they want. So I'm just so appreciative of our special guest coming on today, because she knows a lot about disabilities. She knows a lot about caregiving, but she also knows a lot about a lot of other things. So without any further ado, we're going to bring on my friend, Lisa Haen. Hello, Lisa.
Hey, Brian.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for asking.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
This is awesome. So, Lisa, tell me, what is the best advice you've ever gotten?
I think the best advice that I've ever gotten was from my grandmother, who said, Lisa, choose your spouse wisely. They can be the greatest source of happiness or the greatest source of misery.
If you want to hear more, stay right there. And welcome back. Thank you so much again, Lisa. There's a lot that I want to cover with you, but before we do that, I want to encourage everyone listening to share this video out with as many people as you can think of, because putting this out there is making the community larger, and making this community larger is really what it's all about. So thank you for that. Also, put a picture of you winking in your timeline, if you would. And when you wink, I want you to think, right, there you go. I want you to think, if this guy, me, and Lisa, they knows what makes him unique, and it's not his eye, I wonder what makes me unique. So if you can understand what makes you unique, and then you can use that to make someone else's life better, your whole world is going to change. And I'm so appreciative of you being on, and I'm appreciative of you, all that you've done for us so far. So. Oh, and by the way, also go to brianwagner.live and follow the Radical Vision. What do I call it? Radical Vision Insights. That's it. The Vision Insights. And then you'll be up to date with everything going on with us. So, wow, I'm all full. Lisa, thank you.
You're welcome, Brian. Glad to be here.
Tell us your story.
Well, I was. Well, in terms of my story, I own and operate a company called Culture Inside Out, where we believe what happens on the inside shows up to the world on the outside, and it matters how we show up. And like I mentioned earlier, my grandma told me, choose your spouse wisely, because they can be the greatest source of happiness or the greatest source of misery. And it's the same with how we show up to work. And we spend about 100,000 hours at work over the course of our career. So greatest source of happiness or greatest source of misery. And, guiding leaders to creating inclusive cultures is what I have a lot of passion around. So I had the fortunate opportunity to have a very diverse career. I started off in utility contractor, went to municipal government, went to state association, and wound up at corporate. And through those years, I applied different techniques to shift behaviors and to build and shape cultures. And I learned quickly that that success came down to 6 areas of focus. So I learned that leadership impact, obviously we all know it starts at the top, right? But then there's that integrated approach. So it's top down, bottom up, and lateral. And when we apply an integrated approach to leadership, we see a lot of success in terms of team alliance. So your teams are more cohesive. And the other things that come into play in terms of those key areas are better communications, safety and health, and we learned a lot about that through the COVID era. We're still, we're at the end in some cases, but we still have a long way to go, right? But safety and health is important in our workplace. Effective conflict resolution. So we saw a lot of conflict over the span of 12 months in 2020, but how we deal with that is important. And then adaptive resilience. And I think that we also, got a real a jolt taste of being resilient in 2020. So that's, kind of where I'm at. I created a culture agility model to help leaders navigate through those, their own behaviors and through the behaviors of others to improve the workplace and to, build relationships. So there's skill that you need to practice. And if you have those skills, those 100,000 hours get a lot easier.
100,000 hours. Where's that number come from?
That comes from roughly a 40-hour work week for about 30 years of a career. So give or take. So 100,000 hours is a lot of time to be spending at work. And, that's just, it's important to be satisfied and fulfilled with the work you do and the people who you work with. So happy, healthy, productive people do really good things in the world. And we know the flip side, that miserable people just bring us down. Yeah. So it's important.
You mentioned a phrase, and I've lost it already. Reactive agility? No, that's not it.
Adaptive resilience.
Adaptive resilience. I was way off.
Yeah. Not really.
Tell us more about what adaptive resilience means.
Well, we learned a lot about adaptive resilience in 2020. So I started building the foundation of culture agility back about 2018. I had been working with techniques throughout my career, obviously, but really pulled it all together in 2018. And what culture agility really does in terms of adaptive resilience is it teaches us how to be very fluid in our processes, in our mindsets, and the things we do, so we can be innovative and creative. And we saw in 2020 that was first and foremost of importance. If you were going to survive, you had to be resilient. You had to be adaptive. That adaptive thinking is critical. And I think my favorite story about adaptive resilience is a partnership between McDonald's and Aldi's. So Aldi's is a grocery store chain, and we all know who McDonald's is, right?
Right.
So when the pandemic hit, Aldi's needed employees. They were essential. We all needed groceries, and they couldn't shut down, or they chose to not shut down, and they needed employees, and they knew it was going to be temporary, right? So they didn't want to hire a bunch of people and then have to lay them off after the pandemic was over, because we all hope that it's going to be over, right?
Right.
So McDonald's had just the opposite challenge. They had a number of employees, but they had to furlough them because there weren't a lot of people going through the drive-through or, buying fast food, especially early on in the pandemic. So they developed a resilient partnership where McDonald's borrowed their employees to Aldi's. And then with the intention of, once the pandemic was past us, then they would give those employees back to McDonald's and business as usual. So that adaptive thinking is the key in a lot of business success, because if you stay stagnant or don't evolve with the way the world is shifting, then you're going to become irrelevant really fast.
Right.
So a resilient negative story is Toys R Us. And when we think about Toys R Us, I remember growing up with Toys R Us. My daughter, Jeffrey the giraffe, and the jingle, and then there was Babies R Us, and so they really had a cutting edge advantage early on. But what they did was they rested on their laurels. They said, we're successful, and let's just move forward. If you ever walked into a Toys R Us store, and here in Green Bay, Wisconsin, we had one, and I walked in, and it was dark and it was gloomy. And the help was non-existent in some cases. You'd walk in and there would be nobody that you could see, that was working there. So I think they could have been resilient and moved and shifted with the times and created a more fun environment, the same fun environment that their commercials invoked in us. So, it was a completely different feel from the commercials and the advertisement and the marketing to the actual experience in the store. And we all know what happened to Toys R Us, right? They went out of business. So those are a few things that adaptive resilience can really, help us be successful or, really take our business in the direction that we don't want it to go.
Now, I think you've really used adaptive resilience when it comes to your home life as well, right?
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so it's 2011, and my husband was asking me some questions about the weekend, and I told him that, yes, we were going to his parents' house over the weekend. And about 20 minutes later, he came back and he asked the same question. And at first I was thinking, male selective hearing, aren't you listening to me?
You asked me these questions, I gave you the answers.
Right. Yeah. And so I told him again, and I was upset, right? Because I'm a wife, and listen to me, when you ask questions, you should, And then he started losing his keys, and he started losing his phone and started repeating questions. And I thought, better pay attention. I realized it wasn't male selective hearing, that he wasn't remembering what I was telling him. So I observed for a while and realized something was amiss. Now, backstory, my husband worked on the road Monday through Thursday. So I didn't see him every day of the week when he was working. For 12 years, that's the way our life was. He worked on the road Monday through Thursday. I worked on the road sometimes with my job. So it was ships passing in the night sometimes. So I didn't have that, integrated approach in terms of understanding who he was outside of work. So when he started displaying those symptoms, I knew something was wrong. And so we started going to neurologists. Now he's in his mid 50s at the time. And the neurologist said, there's nothing we can find. They did all the tests. They tried to figure it out. And everybody said, go home, tell us if it gets worse. And, honestly, Brian, that was my opportunity to be in denial, right? That was my opportunity to say, well, it can't be what we think it is. And, he's too young, and, we didn't know for sure what we were going to find. We tested for Lyme's disease. We tested for a number of other things that could be, cognitively crippling. So needless to say,
how old was he at that point?
He was 57, 56.
Okay. And
so years went by. We kept going to neurologists, and, I went Mayo Clinic and UW system and Freighter, and, we went everywhere, and nobody could give us a diagnosis. Nobody could tell us what was going on, but I knew, right? I knew. And in 2016, we went to another neurologist appointment, and I came from work, so I had my car, and he came from home, so he had his car, and it was going to be just another appointment, right? Just nothing. We can't tell you anything. We don't know. Go home and tell us if it gets worse, right? So we're sitting in the office, in the room, waiting for the neurologist, and he comes in. He looks at my husband. He looks at me. He looks back at my husband, and he says, "It's Alzheimer's." And my husband grabs my hand, and he looks at me and he says, "Are you okay?" And that's the kind of person my husband is. He's always been a very selfless man, always focused on other people and making sure everybody, is all right around him. So we left the office, and, I'm sure he was in shock. I know I was. I was, but I wasn't. I mean, I anticipated it, but he drove home. I'm thankful we had two separate cars, because I sat in the parking lot and, just broke down. I mean, this was just a flood of, relief. Now we know what it is, of freaking out, because now that we know what it is, I don't know what it is. All I knew that people forgot things with Alzheimer's. I had no idea how they died from it or what was happening. And so I did the only thing that I could think of in a time of crisis is to empower myself with knowledge. And I got on the phone with the Alzheimer's Association, and a woman answered, and I don't know her name. I wish I did, but she on the other end of the line was the sweetest, most comforting voice that I had ever encountered. I don't know what we talked about. I don't know anything about the conversation except for three things, actually four things. The first thing she said was, the marriage that you know today is over. And I remember thinking, well, that's really mean. Why would you tell me that? Now, fast forward, that's the best advice she could have given me in that situation, right? So the other things that she told me was practice self-care. Put that first on your list. The second thing she told me was create a very strong support circle. And the last thing she said was be very intentional of what matters most. And those three things really guided me through the process. Now, what happens with Alzheimer's is the brain starts to die, and then it continues to go through the sections of the brain until the person is in a capacitated state. So in essence, what's happening is my husband's brain is dying. And what that means is that every day is a new experience, right? So fast forward 10 years, almost 11 years, we have 3 rules in our house. We used to have only 2, but I cognitively have to keep my husband aware. So I ask him questions. Who are your children? What are your siblings? Just to kind of keep that cognitive juice rolling. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. Yeah. And one day I asked him, honey, what are our house rules? And our house rules are we belly laugh every day and we dance in the kitchen. Sometimes it's a slow dance because we don't feel like dancing, but my husband loves to dance. So those are our rules. And so we had 2 house rules, and now we have 3 because when I asked him that question, he said, I'm in charge. So now we have 3 rules. Tom's in charge. We belly laugh every day and we dance in the kitchen. So those are the things that keep me sane. And then those 3 things, the whole concept of self-care. And I know a lot of times, and I talk about self-care with my clients, and a lot of times we feel like self-care is that fluffy stuff that, oh, boys don't practice self-care or that's a girl thing. And, so it's got a little stigma around it. But in essence, we've learned a lot about self-care in 2020, right? That if we don't take care of ourselves, what's going on inside, then we don't show up well in the world. And it kind of bled into those things that I practice and share with my clients in the culture agility model that, it matters how we show up. And caregiving is not for the faint of heart. I have a girlfriend whose husband passed instantly in a car accident. So her husband was ripped from her life. And I get to spend quality time with my husband. So I appreciate that. Through the whole thing. A positive attitude is everything because, and don't get me wrong, there are days where I just sob uncontrollably about what's happening to me and what's happening to him and what's happening to our family. And, you get caught up in that. And then I have my little pity party and then I wipe my eyes and I move on because staying in that state is not healthy or productive. So I learned that really quick, that resilience of allowing myself, to feel, to mourn the loss, because really when you have a disabled spouse or somebody with cancer or somebody in your condition, there's a loss, right? There's that shift from normalcy. And that was tough for me because my husband and I had a lot of plans, a lot of future retirement goals, and that was all stripped away. And the advice that the Alzheimer's woman told me, that the marriage that I know is over, was the best piece of advice. Because had I tried to hold on to that, those dreams and those plans we had, or if I tried to make it so that it was normal or the way it used to be, I would have wasted a lot of energy. And that just was not in my best interest, nor was it in my husband's best interest. So learned a lot about myself through the process, took some neurology classes in college, took some extra college courses that I did online that, you know, I would never have probably taken before, but the brain is fascinating. And
Yeah.
it certainly did open my eyes to a lot of things. But yeah, so that's kind of my story about my husband, and you know, those three things are really a pillar in my daily life.
Hmm. So what does self-care mean to you?
Personally, it means that I get massages, that I have a cleaning lady, and that I get to exercise. And
I like it.
in the summer, I get to kayak. So
Ah.
those are the things that bring me joy
Hmm.
and ground me. And, you know, I've been getting massages for almost 25 years now. And when I first started, it was because of a boss of mine who gave me a massage certificate for Christmas as a gift. And I went, and she proceeded to explain to me that she views massage as a health type of a practice, if you will, versus what my husband calls a foo-foo thing, an add-on to life. Like if you're really good, once a year you get a massage. Well, I believe that massage should be a regular part of your self-care, because it is, number one, it de-stresses. It makes my lymphatic system better. It flushes out the toxins. You know, it just feels good. And
Mhm.
you know, when you practice self-care, when you work out, when you have a regiment, self-care is also my routine. I have right here, and I'm just gonna pull it out for a second. I have this is my daily. You can't see it very good,
Oh, I can see it. Some of it.
but that's my routine, and I change it once a quarter based on what I need to do for my business, what I need to do for my personal life. But that's my self-care, because that guides me in my journey. Because if I leave working out to feeling like, when I feel like it, forget it. I
Yeah.
will not work out, because nobody likes to work out, because I don't know, I shouldn't say nobody, but I'm sure there's some freaks out there that like to work out, but
These
not
freaks are
me.
hopefully not listening to this. Yeah.
No, I affectionately call them. I wish I was one of those people. I envy that,
Yeah.
because I have to force myself, but I have to put it into perspective, that it makes me feel better, and I know that it's important to my overall health. And let's face it, when you're a caregiver, you have to have health. If you don't have health, if something happens to me, who's going to care for my husband? You know, so
Right.
there are some challenges that you face, and it's all about the reason, right? The reason that self-care is so important is because what's the alternative?
Mm-hmm.
So
Hmm. Hmm. So, if there was one piece of advice you would leave with someone that's a caregiver, it would be self-care, or is there something else?
I would apply all three of the principles.
Mm.
Self-care, because that's inward centered. You have to take care of yourself. It's not an option anymore. You know, the mothers who do everything for everyone else and then forget about themselves, or maybe put themselves last. When you're a caregiver, that's not an option. You have to put yourself first. You have to think about your care first, because secondary care is your in my case, your husband. So in order for me to be
Right.
strong enough to care for him, I have to take care of myself. So it's a frontline focus. And then support circle. When you're a caregiver, it's very lonely. It's incredibly lonely, in the sense that people don't know how to respond. You know, people that you thought that would be around and, you know, supportive and helpful, you know, it's a ghost town
Yeah.
sometimes. And if you're fortunate, you have a good support circle. If you're not fortunate, you have to learn to build that support circle. And it's about deposits and withdrawals, you know. So, you know, even before you become a caretaker, as a human being, build those support circles, because you just never know when you're going to need them. And having support around you is critical when you're trying to navigate such a tough spot in life. And this is caregiving is a tough spot to be in. And then the last thing is priorities. I mean, be very intentional with your actions, because, you know, those little things that used to bug me before my husband's diagnosis, they don't matter anymore.
Yeah.
You know, the things that I held on to and that I wanted to, you know, be part of my life, you know, were gone. And I in college years ago, I had a professor who said, you know, take out a piece of paper and a pen, write your name at the top, and then the next line, write obituary. And our class assignment for grade was to write our own obituary. And
Mm.
you know, I remember thinking, you know, this is the period of time where you walk into class and you got about 2 or 3 weeks to decide whether you want to drop the class or not. Well, I thought, okay, this is the craziest assignment. I don't think I'm going to get anything out of this. I think I'm going to drop the class.
Huh.
So I get home that day and I unpacked my backpack and here's this piece of paper that said Lisa Haen obituary. And I remember thinking, okay, that's right, I got to drop this class. But then over the course of the next couple hours, I thought about it. I thought, okay, you know, Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind. Okay. And so I sat down and I actually put pen to paper and thought about it. And I'll tell you, Brian, that was the most pivotal moment in my life because I am a planner, but you know that plans, you know, you are not in control of your plans, right? You can plan all you want, but things shift and change, and you have to apply that adaptive resilience when that happens. But it's good to think about what you want your end story to look like, you know? So in doing that, I found that it was important to look at all of those factors. So self-care, the support circle, and then being very intentional based on what you want from your life.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. We are eroding our time together. We're already with about 2 or 3 minutes left. And I wanted to get back to your business and talk more about that, but I don't know that we're going to have a chance to.
That's okay.
So I guess that's a great question, or a great intro into what it is that we need to be thinking about for our future, for our end state. You know, what do we want? What do we want in our obituary to read? That's so important. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I'll just share one more thing in terms of my values. I think it's important for everybody to have their values because just like the strategic planning sessions that I run for clients, you have to run everything up and down based on your values. So everything is hinged on your values. And my values are health, wealth, and legacy. So my health is obviously most important because if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. Your wealth is not only family rich and relationship rich, but it's also, you know, that stability that we have when we have financial security. And then legacy, what do I want to leave? What kind of mark do I want to leave in the world? Because again, the company that I own and operate is Culture Inside Out. What happens on the inside shows up to the world on the outside. So how do we want to show up in the world? That's an important question to ask ourselves.
Yeah. I think we can just drop it right there. That sounds like a perfect way to end this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show today, Lisa. This has been phenomenal.
Thank you for having me, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
I'm going to close out the show, but I'm going to put you in the green room if you don't mind. You can go back to the green room on your own. But
yeah. If you want more information about Culture Inside Out, just go to cultureinsideout.com and there's all sorts of good stuff for you there.
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
That's okay. Got you covered, Brian. We're a team today.
All right. So I'm actually gonna put that up here so people can look at that. Cultureinsideout.com.
Correct.
So does it look like this?
There you go.
I spelled it right. Awesome.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, thank you again. I appreciate you being on. So I'll leave it up here for everyone to see. But I will again have as many M&Ms as you want in the green room, and I will talk to you in a little bit.
You know the story about the M&Ms, right?
About was it AC/DC or some band?
Yeah, because if they read through the contract all the way to see that M&Ms, then they knew they read the contract through.
Right.
I think that's a great story.
It is. It is a great story. There's lots of good stories out there. We just need to tell them.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
thank you for providing a platform for that.
Absolutely.
Have a great day.
All
Make
right.
it a great day,
Thanks,
everybody.
Lisa. All right. Bye. Wow. What a great show. And just happy to have Lisa Haen as a friend. She's phenomenal. So hopefully she'll come back someday and talk more about her business as well as her husband. So there's a lot to share. Forgive me, I don't have the names of all the people that are going to be on next week. Hopefully, I'll have that soon. But I'll maybe even post to Facebook and to LinkedIn, so you have it, so you have an idea of who's coming up next week. Lots of good stuff happening. We have a big weekend here for myself. My daughter Jess is graduating from BGSU with her master's, and I'm so proud of her. She's phenomenal. It's just she's Jess is the same one that is Jess that wrote my letter that I talk about in my speaking quite often. But hopefully we'll have a nice weekend with her and celebrating with not only her, but my mom, who's 91, and just really looking forward to that weekend. So it's awesome. So, and you're awesome too. Thank you all so much for being on. I appreciate you all. And if there's ever anything that I can do for you, please let me know. And as always, keep